Ma'am, you need to come with us. Now. The TSA agent's hand was already on Lily Thompson's arm, before she could process what was happening. Her boarding pass for Flight 447 to Chicago, the flight that would take her to her daughter's college graduation, slipped from her fingers and floated to the airport floor. I'm sorry, what? Lily's voice came out smaller than she intended. Around her, travelers in the security line turned to stare. Phones came up. Someone was already recording. Lily Marie Thompson. A second agent appeared, this one holding handcuffs. You're under arrest for drug trafficking and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. The world tilted. Lily was 42 years old, a single mother who'd worked 3 jobs to put her daughter Maya through school. She'd never even gotten a speeding ticket. And now, in the middle of Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses, she was being arrested for crimes she'd never heard of. There's been a mistake, she said, her voice shaking. I'm a paralegal. I work at the district attorney's office. I would never. Save it for your lawyer. The agent pulled her arms behind her back. The metal cuffs bit into her wrists. Cold, final, unforgiving. That's when she saw him. Standing 20 feet away near the Starbucks kiosk, watching the entire scene unfold with a small, satisfied smile. Assistant District Attorney Preston Williams. Her boss, the man she'd trained, the man whose career she'd built with 14 years of meticulous legal research, case preparation, and loyalty. Their eyes met across the crowd. Preston raised his coffee cup in a small, mocking salute. Then he turned and walked away, merging into the river of travelers like he'd never been there at all. My name is Lily Thompson. I'm not supposed to be telling you this story from a courtroom 20 years later, wearing a judge's robe and holding the power to destroy the man who destroyed me. But that's exactly where this is going. Because the day Preston Williams framed me for his crimes was the day he made the biggest mistake of his calculated, corrupt life. He thought he was bearing evidence. He was actually creating a witness. 3 hours earlier, Lily had been sitting at her desk in the district attorney's office, surrounded by case files and cold coffee, trying to finish the Patterson drug case before her 6 p.m. flight. Preston had dumped the file on her desk that morning, his usual move when he wanted someone else to do his work. Need this wrapped up before the preliminary hearing Monday, he'd said, not even looking up from his phone. You're good at making my messes look pretty, right, Lily? She'd smiled, nodded, like always, because that's what you did when you were a black woman working in a prosecutor's office where you'd been passed over for promotion 6 times while watching less qualified lawyers, all of them white, or, in Preston's case, the right kind of black climb over you. Preston Williams was 45, Howard Law graduate, member of Jack and Jill, links to every powerful black family in Atlanta's political scene. His father had been a judge. His mother sat on the school board. Preston wore Tom Ford suits and drove a Tesla, and belonged to the kind of country club that had only started accepting black members a generation ago. Lily wore Target clearance and took the bus and lived in the same neighborhood she'd grown up in. They were both black, but they might as well have been from different planets. The Patterson file was supposed to be routine. Marcus Patterson, low-level dealer, caught with 2 kilos of fentanyl in his trunk during a traffic stop. Open and shut. Except when Lily started reviewing the evidence chain, something felt wrong. The drugs had been logged into evidence at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. But according to the arrest report, Patterson wasn't pulled over until 4:15 p.m. that same day. Someone had logged evidence before the suspect was even arrested. Lily's hands had gone cold. She pulled up the evidence room access logs. Preston's badge had scanned in at 3:30 p.m. that Tuesday. He'd been alone in the evidence room for 23 minutes. Her phone buzzed. Text from Maya. Mom, what time does your flight land? So excited to see you. Lily stared at the screen, then back at the file. She should leave it alone. She should finish the paperwork, catch her flight, and spend the weekend celebrating her daughter's achievement. She'd worked 3 jobs for 4 years to make that graduation happen. Waitressing at night, paralegal work during the day, weekend data entry when she could find it. But she couldn't. Because Marcus Patterson was a 23-year-old kid with a public defender who probably had 200 other cases. And if what Lily was seeing was real, if Preston had planted evidence, then Patterson was going to prison for Preston's crime. She'd made copies, USB drive hidden in her purse, printed documents folded into her carry-on. She wasn't sure what she'd do with them yet, but she knew she couldn't let this go. That had been her first mistake. Her second was not noticing that Preston had been standing in the doorway, watching her print those documents. Now in the airport, being perp-walked through security while travelers filmed and whispered, Lily understood. Preston hadn't just been moving drugs. He'd been running a whole operation, using his position to steal from evidence, redistribute through networks, and frame defendants for quantities they'd never possessed. And she'd found proof. So he'd made her the criminal instead, planted evidence in her checked luggage, called in an anonymous tip, arranged for her arrest at the airport where there would be maximum witnesses, maximum humiliation, maximum impossibility of escape. The security office was small and cold. They processed her like she was already guilty. Fingerprints, photos, Miranda, rights read in a bored monotone by an officer who'd probably done this 1,000 times. You have the right to remain silent. But Lily didn't want to remain silent. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them about Preston, about the evidence, about the setup. But who would believe her? A paralegal accusing an assistant district attorney? A woman who'd just been caught with drugs in her luggage pointing fingers at her boss. I need to call my daughter, Lily said. Please. She's waiting for me. She's graduating tomorrow. The officer didn't even look up. You get one call. Make it count. Lily's hands shook as she dialed. Maya's voice, bright and happy. Mom, are you landing soon? And Lily had to say the words that would break both their hearts. Baby, I'm not coming. Something's happened. Something terrible. And I need you to listen very carefully. If you're watching this because you believe in justice, because you've ever felt powerless against someone with more money or connections or privilege, then you need to see where this goes. Because what Preston Williams didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that destroying Lily Thompson wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of his reckoning. The Fulton County Jail smelled like industrial cleaner in desperation. Lily sat on a metal bench in an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big, waiting for her bail hearing while women around her cried, slept, or stared at nothing with eyes that had already given up. She'd been in custody for 18 hours. No sleep, no food she could stomach, and no lawyer except the public defender who'd introduced himself 7 minutes ago with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. Ms. Thompson, I'm Jeremy Kaufman. I'll be representing you today. He was maybe 28, with a coffee stain on his tie, and 3 different case files juggling in his arms. I've reviewed your charges. Drug trafficking, conspiracy, possession with intent. That's serious. I didn't do it. Lily's voice was hoarse. She'd said those words so many times in the past 18 hours they'd started to sound meaningless even to her own ears. Right, okay. Well, the evidence is pretty damaging. They found 2 kilos of fentanyl in your checked luggage, packaged for distribution, plus financial records showing deposits into your account that matched known trafficking patterns. Jeremy flipped through papers without really looking at them. The DA's office is pushing for no bail, flight risk, danger to the community, the usual. The DA's office? Lily felt something cold settle in her chest. Who's prosecuting? Jeremy checked his notes. Assistant District Attorney Preston Williams says here he knows you. Former colleague? Of course. Preston wouldn't just frame her. He'd prosecute her himself. The audacity was almost beautiful in its cruelty. He planted those drugs, Lily said, leaning forward. Preston Williams is running a drug operation out of the evidence room. I found proof. That's why he's doing this. He's covering his tracks. Jeremy's expression shifted from tired to uncomfortable. Ms. Thompson, I understand you're upset, but accusing a prosecutor of, I have evidence, had evidence. USB drive, printed documents. They were in my purse, my carry-on. Where's my luggage? Currently being held as evidence. Jeremy closed his folder. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. The conspiracy defense claiming the prosecutor framed you, it doesn't play well. Makes you look desperate. What we need to focus on is negotiating a plea deal. With your clean record, we might get it down to 8 years, maybe 6 with good behavior. 8 years, Lily's daughter would be 30. She'd miss her entire 20s. Birthdays, first job, first heartbreak, first everything. All because Preston Williams needed to bury evidence and decided Lily Thompson was disposable. I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do. Jeremy sighed the way doctors do when patients refuse treatment. Then we go to trial. And Miss Thompson, I have to tell you, based on what I'm seeing here, we're going to lose. Badly. The bail hearing was a nightmare dressed as due process. Lily stood in her orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles, while Preston Williams' tailored navy suit, confident smile, argued why she should rot in jail until trial. Your Honor, Ms. Thompson poses a significant flight risk. She was arrested at the airport, literally attempting to flee the jurisdiction. Preston's voice carried that smooth authority he'd perfected, the one that made juries trust him instinctively. We're talking about 2 kilograms of fentanyl. That's not personal use. That's distribution. That's sophisticated criminal enterprise. Judge Morrison, a white woman in her 60s who looked like she'd already decided, barely glanced at Lily. Mr. Kaufman, does your client have ties to the community? Jeremy stood up, fumbling with his notes. Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Thompson has lived in Atlanta her entire life. She has a daughter, stable employment. Well, had stable employment. Had? Preston interrupted smoothly. Ms. Thompson was terminated from the district attorney's office immediately upon her arrest. For obvious reasons, we can't have someone involved in drug trafficking working in our office. The irony isn't lost on us, Your Honor. We trusted her with our most sensitive cases, and all along she was... He paused, shaking his head with perfectly performed disappointment. Several people in the courtroom gallery murmured. Lily saw them, colleagues from the DAS office. People she'd worked with for 14 years, looking at her like she was already guilty. Like she'd always been guilty and they'd just been too naive to see it. Bail is denied. Judge Morrison's gavel came down. Trial date set for 8 weeks from today. Ms. Thompson will remain in custody. As they led her back to the holding cell, Lily caught Preston's eye. He wasn't even trying to hide his satisfaction. He mouthed 2 words. Stay quiet. Maya came to visit on day 3. 22 years old, graduation. Gown still hanging in her dorm closet unworn because she'd driven straight back to Atlanta when she got her mother's call. She sat across from Lily in the visiting room, separated by plexiglass and phones that made their voices sound tinny and far away. Mom, what's happening? Everyone's saying terrible things. It's all over the news. DA paralegal arrested in drug bust. They're using your picture. That one from the office Christmas party. You're smiling and they're acting like you're some kind of criminal. Baby, listen to me. Lily pressed her hand against the glass. I didn't do this. Preston Williams set me up. He's been stealing drugs from evidence, redistributing them, framing defendants. I found out, so he framed me. Then tell them. Tell the judge. Tell your lawyer. It's my word against an assistant district attorney's, and he took all my proof. Lily felt the weight of 14 years collapsing on her chest. Maya, I need you to do something for me. In my apartment, in the closet, there's a box. Old case files I brought home over the years, just research copies. Look for anything with Preston's name on it. Any case where the evidence doesn't quite add up. Any pattern of visiting times up, the guard announced. Mom, I'm scared. Maya's voice cracked. What if they convict you? What if, then I'll fight from inside. Lily surprised herself with how steady she sounded. And when I get out, I'm going to make sure Preston Williams pays for every single day he stole from us. The guard pulled her away before Maya could respond. But Lily had seen something shift in her daughter's face. Not just fear anymore, something harder. Determination, maybe. Or rage. Good. They were going to need both. Back in her cell that night, Lily lay on a mattress that felt like concrete and thought about the past 14 years. How she'd started at the DA's office right out of community college, just a file clerk making $9 an hour. How she'd worked her way up to paralegal by taking night classes and volunteering for every case nobody else wanted. How she'd met Preston Williams on his first day, fresh from Howard Law, drowning in case files he didn't know how to organize. How she'd helped him, taught him the systems, showed him which judges responded to which arguments, wrote his briefs when he was overwhelmed, covered his mistakes when he forgot to file motions on time. She'd made him successful. She'd handed him case after case, victory after victory, while she stayed in the background doing the real work. And he'd climbed over her, through her, past her, until he was prosecuting major cases and she was still filing paperwork for less than $40,000 a year. Lily had told herself it was fine. She had Maya to think about. Stability mattered more than recognition. And besides, Preston had always been nice to her. Brought her coffee sometimes. Asked about Maya's college search. Wrote her a decent recommendation when she applied for promotions she never got. She'd mistaken basic courtesy for loyalty. That had been her biggest mistake. Well, second biggest. The first was believing that working within the system, following the rules, being the good kind of black woman who didn't make waves, believing that any of that would protect her. Preston had taught her different. He'd taught her that power didn't reward patience. It rewarded ruthlessness. And the only thing Preston respected was the thing he'd never expected Lily Thompson to have. The will to destroy him completely, no matter how long it took. A guard walked past, keys jangling. "Thompson, your lawyer's here." Jeremy Kaufman sat in the attorney meeting room looking even more exhausted than before. "I've been going through the prosecution's evidence. It's comprehensive. Financial records, witness statements, the drugs themselves. Miss Thompson, they've built an airtight case. 8 years on a plea deal is starting to look generous. Or, Lily said quietly, we could actually fight. With what? We have no witnesses, no evidence, we have 14 years of Preston Williams's cases. We have patterns. We have every time evidence was logged incorrectly, every time chain of custody was questionable, every defendant who took a plea deal rather than fight charges that seemed inflated." Lily leaned forward. "My daughter is collecting those files right now. And when we go to trial, we're not defending me. We're prosecuting him." Jeremy stared at her. "That's not how criminal defense works. We can't just..." "Then you're fired." "Excuse me?" "You're fired! I'm representing myself." Jeremy's jaw dropped. "Miss Thompson, representing yourself in a federal drug case is suicide. The judge will have to allow it. It's my constitutional right." Lily stood up. "And Jeremy?" "When Preston Williams realizes I'm not rolling over, when he understands that I'm coming for him with everything I've got, he's going to make mistakes. Arrogant men always do. They can't help themselves." As the guard escorted her back to her cell, Lily felt something she hadn't felt since the handcuffs closed around her wrists at the airport. Not hope exactly. Hope was too soft, too fragile for what she was feeling. This was harder, colder. This was the moment a paralegal with nothing left to lose decided to become a lawyer with everything to fight for. And Preston Williams sitting in his office, sipping his overpriced coffee, congratulating himself on how perfectly he'd buried his problem. He had absolutely no idea what he'd created. The Fulton County Jail Library was a joke. 12 outdated legal textbooks, half of them missing pages, and a computer so old it took 5 minutes to boot up. But Lily Thompson spent every hour she was allowed there, reading Georgia criminal procedure codes until her eyes burned and her head pounded. She had 6 weeks until trial. 6 weeks to learn what most lawyers spent 3 years in law school studying. 6 weeks to build a defense, investigate Preston's corruption, and somehow convince a jury that the assistant district attorney prosecuting her was actually the criminal. Impossible didn't even begin to cover it. "You're wasting your time." The voice came from the woman on the computer next to her. Rita Morales, 50s, in for check fraud. 3 months left on her sentence. She'd been watching Lily for days. "Representing yourself? Girl, that's how you guarantee a conviction. Then I'll lose learning something instead of lose doing nothing." Lily didn't look up from Georgia Rules of Evidence, 8th edition. Rita was quiet for a moment. Then, My ex-husband was a defense attorney. Left his case files in our garage when he ran off with his paralegal. If you want, I can have my sister bring some by next visiting day. Might help more than that dinosaur textbook. Lily finally looked up. Why would you help me? Because I've been in here long enough to know who's actually guilty and who got railroaded. And you. Rita smiled grimly. You got railroaded by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. That kind of precision cruelty doesn't come from nowhere. Your prosecutor's done this before. She had no idea how right she was. Maya came 3 times a week, arms full of file folders she'd pulled from Lily's apartment. They had 30 minutes per visit to sort through 14 years of cases, looking for patterns in Preston's prosecutions. Mom, look at this. Maya spread papers across the visiting room table during week 2. Marcus Patterson case, the one you were reviewing when this all started. I pulled the public records. Patterson took a plea deal, served 18 months. Released 4 months ago. Okay. And 2 weeks before your arrest, he filed a motion to vacate his conviction. Claims the evidence was planted. His new lawyer is Marcus Chen Big's civil rights firm. Takes wrongful conviction cases. Maya's eyes were bright with something between hope and fury. Mom, Patterson's lawyer requested the evidence logs. The same ones you were looking at. Lily's hands went still on the papers. Preston knew Patterson was challenging the conviction. And he knew you'd seen the evidence discrepancies. Maya leaned forward. So he didn't just frame you to cover up his drug operation. He framed you to discredit the one witness who could prove Patterson was innocent. If you're a convicted drug trafficker, your testimony about Preston planting evidence becomes worthless. The precision of it was almost admirable. Preston hadn't just destroyed Lily's freedom. He'd destroyed her credibility, her value as a witness, her ability to ever threaten him again. One arrest, multiple problems solved. We need to find Marcus Chen, Lily said. And we need to find Patterson. Marcus Chen turned out to be a 40-year-old Korean-American attorney with a reputation for taking on impossible cases and a personal hatred for corrupt prosecutors. When Maya tracked him down and explained her mother's situation, he drove to the jail the next day. Miss Thompson. He sat across from her in the attorney meeting room, expensive suit and tired eyes. Your daughter is very persuasive. And very worried about you. Mr. Chen, I need to know, has Preston Williams contacted you about the Patterson case? Funny you should ask. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolled, turned it to face her. An email from Preston Williams, dated 3 days after Lily's arrest. Mr. Chen, regarding your client Marcus Patterson's motion to vacate, I've recently discovered troubling information about our former paralegal Lily Thompson. It appears she may have tampered with evidence in several cases, including Patterson's. I wanted to inform you before we proceed, as this may affect your client's motion. We take evidence integrity extremely seriously. Lily felt rage burn through her chest. He's preemptively discrediting me to Patterson's lawyer, making sure that even if Patterson's conviction gets overturned, no one connects it to Preston's corruption. Exactly. Which is why I didn't believe him. Marcus put his phone away. I've been prosecuting wrongful conviction cases for 15 years. I know what planted evidence looks like. And I know what a prosecutor looks like when he's covering his tracks. He leaned forward. Miss Thompson, I can't represent you conflict of interest, since I'm representing Patterson. But I can tell you this. If you can prove Preston Williams framed you, you simultaneously prove he framed my client. And I have resources. What kind of resources? The kind that can subpoena Preston's phone records, his financial statements, his evidence room access logs for the past 5 years. The kind that can depose every defendant he's ever prosecuted for drug charges. The kind that can make his life very, very uncomfortable. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I can't defend you, but I can investigate the hell out of him. And if we're lucky, what I find defending Patterson will help you defend yourself. For the first time since the handcuffs closed at the airport, Lily felt something shift. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Maya collecting files. She had Rita offering legal materials. And now she had Marcus Chen, a lawyer who hated corrupt prosecutors as much as she did, digging into Preston's past. Preston had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed Lily would break. That she'd take a plea deal, disappear quietly, and let him bury his crimes along with her freedom. He'd forgotten that the woman who'd worked 3 jobs to put her daughter through college wasn't someone who gave up easily. He'd forgotten that the paralegal who'd built his career knew every single case he'd ever prosecuted, every trick he'd ever used, every corner he'd ever cut, and she'd remembered all of it. Week 4. Preston sent a message through the system. Guard delivered it during dinner. Formal motion to restrict Lily's access to legal materials, claiming she was using jail resources inappropriately. The motion was denied, but the message was clear. He was watching. He knew she was preparing. And he wanted her to know that he could make even jail more miserable if she didn't fall in line. 2 days later, another message. This one wasn't official, just a note, handwritten, slipped into her lunch tray by a guard who wouldn't meet her eyes. You're going to lose. You know that, right? 8 years minimum, probably 12. Your daughter will be in her 30s before you get out. All because you couldn't mind your own business. Take the plea deal, Lily. Save yourself the humiliation of watching me destroy you in court. Lily read it 3 times. Then she used it as a bookmark in her legal textbook, right at the chapter on prosecutorial misconduct. Let Preston wonder why she wasn't responding. Let him think she was scared. She was terrified, actually. But fear and determination weren't mutually exclusive. She'd learned that working 3 jobs, raising a daughter alone, surviving in a system designed to keep people like her in their place. Fear just meant the stakes were real. It didn't mean you stopped fighting. Week 5. Marcus Chen's investigation was bearing fruit. He'd subpoenaed Preston's evidence room access logs and found a pattern. 17 times in the past 2 years, Preston had accessed the evidence room alone, outside normal business hours. And in 14 of those 17 instances, drug quantities in pending cases had mysteriously increased between initial booking and trial presentation. A defendant arrested with 50 grams would suddenly be charged with possession of 200 grams. Evidence logs would be corrected, amended, clarified. Defense attorneys, overworked and underpaid, rarely caught the discrepancies. Defendants took plea deals rather than fight charges that seemed insurmountable. Preston had been inflating drug quantities, stealing the excess, and selling it through networks while defendants went to prison for crimes bigger than what they'd actually committed. It was elegant, efficient, and almost impossible to prove without access to the original evidence, which Preston had systematically destroyed or contaminated. Almost impossible. But Marcus had found 3 cases where the original arresting officers had kept personal copies of their incident reports. And in all 3 cases, the drug quantities they'd logged didn't match what Preston had presented at trial. We're building something, Marcus told Lily during a consultation. It's circumstantial, but it's building. If we can get one of these defendants to testify about the quantity discrepancies, if we can show a pattern. It won't be enough, Lily interrupted. Not to prove he framed me specifically. We need something that connects Preston directly to the drugs found in my luggage. Do you have any idea where he might have gotten them? Lily thought about the Patterson case. The 2 kilos that had appeared in evidence before Patterson was even arrested. He's been stealing from evidence for years. The drugs in my luggage probably came from another case entirely. If we can find which case, if we can prove those specific drugs were logged elsewhere first, then we prove he planted them. Marcus was already taking notes. I'll start cross-referencing evidence logs with your arrest date. If those drugs existed in the system before they showed up in your luggage, there'll be a paper trail. Faint, maybe. But there. Week 6. 2 weeks before trial. Lily received unexpected mail. A letter, no return address, postmarked from South Carolina. Inside, a single page, handwritten. Ms. Thompson, my name is Detective Raymond Pierce, Atlanta PD, retired. I worked with Preston Williams on 6 cases between 2019 and 2021. I had concerns about evidence handling even then. But I was 2 years from pension and I didn't push it. I've been following your case in the news. If you want to talk, my number is below. I can't testify, I have no proof, just suspicions. But I can tell you where to look. Lily's hands shook holding the letter. Preston had been sloppy before. He'd left witnesses, people who'd noticed but stayed quiet. And now, With Lily's case making news, with Marcus Chen's investigation gaining attention, those people were coming forward. Not with enough to free her, not yet. But with breadcrumbs, directions, maps to the evidence she needed. She called Detective Pierce Collect that evening. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Thompson, I wasn't sure you'd call. Why are you helping me?" "Because I didn't help the others. The defendants who got railroaded while I looked the other way." His voice was heavy with something that might have been guilt. "I can't fix what I didn't do. But maybe I can help you fix what Preston's doing now." They talked for 37 minutes. Detective Pierce told her about a case in 2020, a defendant named Terrell Johnson, arrested with 3 kilos of cocaine. Except Pierce distinctly remembered the evidence bag containing 4 kilos when it was logged. He thought he'd miscounted. Now he wasn't sure. "If Preston stole a kilo from that case," Pierce said, "and if he still has access to those evidence records, you might be able to prove the drugs in your luggage came from an existing case. It's not much. But it's a starting point." When Lily hung up, she sat in her cell and let herself feel something dangerous. Not hope was still too fragile, too likely to shatter. But possibility. The sharp, bright edge of maybe. Preston thought he covered every angle. Planted evidence, controlled the narrative, isolated his victim, and consolidated his power. He'd built what he thought was an impenetrable case. But he'd underestimated something fundamental. Lily Thompson had spent 14 years watching him work. She knew his patterns, his shortcuts, his arrogance. And arrogant men always left trails. They couldn't help it. They were too confident in their own cleverness to imagine someone else might be clever enough to follow. 2 weeks until trial. 2 weeks until Lily Thompson, paralegal turned defendant, would walk into a courtroom and do something Preston Williams never expected. She'd put him on trial right back. The courtroom was packed. Media in the back rows, sketch artists poised, every seat filled with people who'd come to watch the disgraced paralegal try to defend herself against the polished prosecutor. Entertainment disguised as justice. Preston Williams stood for his opening statement wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lily's monthly rent used to. He looked relaxed, confident, like a man delivering a speech he'd rehearsed in his sleep. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about betrayal." For 14 years, Lily Thompson worked in the district attorney's office. We trusted her. We gave her access to our most sensitive cases, our evidence, our files. And she used that trust to build a criminal enterprise right under our noses. He paused, shaking his head with practiced disappointment. 2 kilograms of fentanyl. Enough to kill thousands. Found in her luggage as she attempted to flee the jurisdiction. The evidence is overwhelming. The facts are clear. And by the end of this trial, you'll have no choice but to find her guilty. When it was Lily's turn, she stood in her borrowed suit. Maya had brought it. Too big in the shoulders, but professional enough, and walked to face the jury. 12 faces, mostly skeptical, already half convinced by Preston's performance. "My name is Lily Thompson. I'm not a lawyer, as you can probably tell. I'm a paralegal, was a paralegal. And Mr. Williams is right about one thing. This case is about betrayal. But not mine." She let that hang in the air. "For the next few days, you're going to see something unusual. You're going to see a defendant ask questions that sound more like an investigation than a defense, because that's exactly what this is. While I've been in jail for 6 weeks, unable to work, unable to see my daughter except through plexiglass, I've been investigating the man prosecuting me. And what I found is going to make you question everything you think you know about this case." Preston's jaw tightened. First crack in the facade. The prosecution's case was textbook. D-Agent testified about finding the drugs in Lily's luggage. T.S., a supervisor, confirmed she'd been flagged by an anonymous tip. Forensics expert verified the purity and street value of the fentanyl. Everything clean, procedural, damning. But Lily cross-examined each witness with questions that didn't quite fit the normal defense pattern. To the D-Agent, "How long have you worked with the district attorney's office on drug cases?" "About 8 years. And specifically with Assistant DA Preston Williams?" "Maybe 15-20 cases. Did Mr. Williams ever discuss this case with you before my arrest?" "Before the anonymous tip came in, The agent hesitated. He called me a week before, said he had concerns about someone in his office possibly compromising cases. Murmurs in the courtroom. Preston's expression stayed neutral, but Lily saw his hand clench around his pen. To the forensics expert, the drugs found in my luggage, were they tested for fingerprints? Yes. We found yours. Anyone else's? No. Isn't that unusual? 2 kilos of packaged drugs, and the only fingerprints are from the person who allegedly transported them. No prints from whoever packaged them, distributed them, or handled them before me. The expert shifted. Sometimes traffickers wear gloves, but I didn't, apparently. I wore gloves to package 2 kilos of drugs, but then touched the packages with my bare hands before putting them in my luggage. Lily let the jury think about that. Or someone else wore gloves to plant evidence and made sure to press my fingers against it afterward. Day 2. Lily called her first witness, Maya Thompson. Miss Thompson, my daughter, can you tell the jury what you found in my apartment after my arrest? Maya, nervous but clear-voiced, described the files. Dozens of cases, all prosecuted by Preston Williams, all with evidence discrepancies. Drug quantities that didn't match initial arrest reports. Chain of custody gaps. Evidence logged at impossible times. Preston objected 3 times during Maya's testimony. The judge, a black woman named Claudia Rice who'd been watching everything with sharp eyes, overruled him each time. Mr. Williams, Miss Thompson is representing herself. I'm going to give her latitude to present her defense, even if it's unconventional. Overruled. Next witness, Marcus Chen. Mr. Chen, you represent Marcus Patterson, who is convicted in a case I helped build. Can you tell the jury about your investigation into that conviction? Marcus described the evidence logs showing drugs logged before the arrest happened. The pattern of Preston accessing the evidence room alone. The 17 cases with quantity discrepancies. The 3 defendants whose original arrest reports didn't match the charges they'd been convicted of. And what conclusion did you draw from this pattern? That Assistant District Attorney Preston Williams has been systematically stealing drugs from evidence, inflating charges against defendants, and redistributing the stolen narcotics for personal profit. The courtroom erupted. Judge Rice's gavel came down hard. Order in this court. Preston was on his feet. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Mr. Chen is making wild accusations without evidence, defaming a prosecutor to help his client. I have evidence, Marcus said calmly. He pulled out a folder. Subpoenaed phone records showing Preston Williams in contact with known drug distributors. Financial records showing deposits into offshore accounts that match the street value of missing evidence. And surveillance footage from the evidence room showing Mr. Williams alone with evidence bags on 17 separate occasions. Lily watched Preston's face. The confident mask was cracking. His skin had gone gray. His hand shook slightly as he gripped the prosecution table. Your Honor. Preston's voice was strained now. This is a conspiracy theory designed to distract from the defendant's obvious guilt. There's no proof that any of this connects to. Actually, Lily interrupted. There is. She approached the evidence table and picked up the bags containing the fentanyl from her luggage. These drugs have an evidence number stamped on the interior packaging. EPD 20194477. That's not a new evidence number. That's from a case 4 years ago. She pulled out documents Marcus had helped her obtain. KCPD 20194477. Defendant, Terrell Johnson. Arrested with 4 kilograms of cocaine. But when the case went to trial, only 3 kilograms were presented as evidence. 1 kilogram vanished from the evidence room. She looked directly at Preston. The evidence log shows you accessed that case file 2 days before my arrest. And the drugs in my luggage? Forensic analysis matches the chemical signature of the cocaine from Johnson's case. Someone repackaged it, relabeled it, and planted it in my luggage. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Preston stood up slowly. His hands were shaking now, visible to everyone. That's impossible. The evidence numbers are... I learned evidence protocol from you, Preston. Lily's voice was steady, cold. 14 years of watching you. I know you reuse evidence numbers when you need to cover tracks. I know you log evidence incorrectly and then correct it later. I know every shortcut, every corner you cut, every trick you taught me when you thought I was just your helpful paralegal who'd never be smart enough to notice. If you're watching this and you've ever wondered whether one person can really stand up to a corrupt system, stay with me. Because what happened next proved that sometimes the system can be forced to work if you know it better than the people abusing it. Detective Raymond Pierce testified next, retired and with nothing to lose. He described his suspicions about Preston, the cases that had bothered him, the evidence that hadn't added up. His testimony wasn't proof alone, but added to everything else, it became a pattern too big to ignore. Then came the witness no one expected, Jessica Thornton, another prosecutor in the DA's office. Young, ambitious, terrified. But she'd worked with Preston on 2 cases and she'd noticed things. He told me to amend evidence reports, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Said it was just correcting paperwork errors. But the amounts changed. The quantities got bigger. And when I questioned it, he said, she swallowed hard. He said that's how you build impressive conviction rates. That's how you move up. Preston lunged from his chair. You lying? He caught himself. But too late. The jury had seen it. The judge had seen it. Everyone had seen the mask slip completely, revealing the rage underneath. Mr. Williams. Judge Rice's voice was ice. Sit down, now. Preston sat, but he'd lost control. His lawyer, appointed by the DA's office to assist with the prosecution, was whispering urgently, probably telling him to request a recess, to regroup, to stop the hemorrhaging. But Preston couldn't stop. His entire career, his entire identity was collapsing in real time. Your Honor. Preston's voice was desperate now. Ms. Thompson is manipulating evidence, creating conspiracy theories. Actually, Judge Rice interrupted. What I'm seeing is a defendant presenting a compelling case that evidence in her arrest was planted. Mr. Williams, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I remind you that you're an officer of this court. Have you ever accessed evidence inappropriately? The courtroom held its breath. Preston's mouth opened, closed. His lawyer grabbed his arm, whispered something urgent. But Preston had already hesitated too long. The silence was an answer in itself. I want a full investigation into these allegations, Judge Rice said. I'm suspending this trial pending review by the State Bar and an independent investigation into the District Attorney Office's evidence handling procedures. She looked at Lily. Miss Thompson, you're released on your own recognizance pending the outcome of these investigations. The gavel came down. Lily stood there, not quite believing it. 6 weeks in jail. 6 weeks of being told she'd lose. She'd spend years in prison. She'd never see freedom again. And now, Miss Thompson. Judge Rice's voice was softer now. I don't know yet if you're innocent. But I know you've raised enough questions that you shouldn't be behind bars while we find answers. Bailiff, remove her restraints. The handcuffs came off. Lily's wrists were raw underneath, marked by weeks of metal. Maya pushed through the gallery and grabbed her mother in a hug so tight neither of them could breathe properly. Preston Williams was escorted out by his own colleagues, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. He looked back once, caught Lily's eye. The hatred there was pure and absolute. But underneath it, for just a moment, Lily saw something else, fear. Because Preston Williams, who'd sent dozens of people to prison, who'd built his career on other people's destroyed lives, who'd thought he was untouchable, he was about to learn what it felt like to be on the other side of the system he'd corrupted. And this time, there'd be no helpful paralegal working behind the scenes to save him. The investigation took 4 months. 4 months of State Bar reviews, forensic audits, witness interviews, and evidence analysis. And with every passing week, Preston Williams's empire crumbled a little more. The DA's office placed him on administrative leave within 48 hours of Judge Rice's order. By week 2, 3 more prosecutors had come forward with stories of Preston pressuring them to amend evidence reports, to overlook discrepancies, to prioritize conviction rates over accuracy. By week 6, the forensic audit revealed that Preston had accessed the evidence room inappropriately 43 times over 5 years, not 17. 43 cases where evidence had been compromised, quantities inflated, or drugs had simply vanished. The street value of missing narcotics exceeded $2 million. By month 3, federal investigators had traced Preston's offshore accounts to deposits matching exactly the estimated value of stolen drugs. They found text messages between Preston and distributors using coded language that wasn't coded enough. They found burner phones, shell companies, and a network so sophisticated it had operated for years under everyone's noses. And they found the smoking gun. Security footage from a storage unit Preston rented under a fake name, showing him repackaging evidence bags 2 days before Lily's arrest. The same bags that ended up in her luggage. Preston Williams was arrested in his own office, in front of his colleagues, wearing the same type of handcuffs he'd sent dozens of innocent people to prison with. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Lily's charges were dismissed with prejudice. Not just dropped, dismissed with a formal apology from the district attorney himself, who'd been Preston's supervisor and had somehow missed 5 years of corruption happening directly under his authority. Ms. Thompson, on behalf of this office, I want to apologize for the injustice you suffered. We failed you. The system failed you. And we're committed to making this right. Making it right meant 43 convictions under review. 43 defendants whose cases Preston had touched, whose evidence might have been planted or inflated, whose lives had been destroyed by a prosecutor who saw them as opportunities for profit rather than people deserving justice. Marcus Patterson was the first to be exonerated. His conviction vacated, his record cleared, 18 months of his life stolen but at least acknowledged. He stood outside the courthouse after his hearing, 24 years old but looking older, and said something that made every news broadcast that night. I told everyone the drugs weren't mine. I told my lawyer, the judge, anyone who'd listen. Nobody believed me. Because who believes a young black man from the hood over an assistant district attorney? The system didn't fail, it worked exactly how it was designed. It just worked against people like me instead of for us. Lily watched that interview from Maya's apartment, where she'd been staying since her release. Maya had taken the semester off from her graduate program to help her mother rebuild. They'd spent weeks going through files, calling defendants, connecting people to lawyers who could help challenge their convictions. Mom, Maya said during one of those long nights surrounded by paperwork, what are you going to do now? After all this? Lily had been thinking about that question since the moment the handcuffs came off. She'd lost her job, her reputation, 6 weeks of her life, and nearly lost everything else. The DA's office had offered her position back with a raise, a formal apology, and a promise to make things right. She'd turned them down. I'm going to law school, Lily said. I'm 42 years old, broke, and I've got a criminal arrest on my record even if it was dismissed. But I spent 6 weeks in jail learning more about the law than most lawyers learn in 3 years. And I realized something: the system doesn't need more prosecutors like Preston. It needs more people like us. People who've been on the other side. People who know what it feels like to be powerless. Maya smiled, her eyes bright with tears. You're going to be an amazing lawyer, Mom. I'm going to try, Lily said. And if I'm very lucky and work very hard, maybe someday I'll be a judge. Someone who actually listens when defendants say they're innocent. Someone who questions prosecutors instead of just trusting them. Someone who remembers what injustice feels like. Preston Williams's trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming, the same kind of overwhelming case he used to build against defendants. Except this time it was all real. Financial records, surveillance footage, witness testimony from prosecutors and defendants alike. Marcus Chen prosecuted, and he was merciless. Preston Williams took an oath, Marcus said in his closing argument. He swore to seek justice, not convictions. To protect the innocent, not profit from their imprisonment. Instead, he turned the justice system into his personal criminal enterprise. He sent innocent people to prison while he sold the drugs that were supposed to be evidence. He destroyed families, ruined lives, and all for what? Money, status, the satisfaction of getting away with it? The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: drug trafficking, evidence tampering, conspiracy, abuse of power, and 37 counts of civil rights violations. The sentencing hearing was packed. Lily sat in the gallery with Maya, watching Preston Williams' Tom Ford suit replaced with an orange jumpsuit. Expensive watch replaced with handcuffs, stand before a judge for sentencing.